Today, I'm going to take you to a poet I read as a student. And then somehow down the years, he has not been really getting the appreciation he deserves. And then 2024, with his death, we remembered, oh yes, I'm talking about Keki N Daruwalla. 1937 to 2024. Yes, Indian writing in English. Remember, we have looked at many other poets. But here is a poet who wrote quite a lot and wrote poems and wrote short stories and was a critic too. Do I really need to tell you something about the period? Remember, the period that we are talking about is post-independent India leading up to the 21st century. Yes, we have had lots of poets, right from Tagore of the previous century, and our own poets of the present. Remember, go back and look at a poem by Kamala Das that we have done. Daruwalla is an Indian poet, but remember, he was born in 1936. Yes, the period of undivided India. And he was born in Lahore. And then they moved to Delhi. And then he went to ever so many schools and colleges, and therefore picked up a number of languages too. He joined the Indian Police Service in 1958 and worked as a police officer till he retired. A number of awards came his way, like the Commonwealth Poetry Prize, the Sahitya Academy Award, and very importantly, the Padma Shri too, as late as 2014. He wrote 12 volumes of poems. That's a big number. A number of short stories, but I want to mention one short story in particular, which was called Love Across the Desert. And can you guess what movie was made out of that? Oh yes, Refugee was supposed to have been based on this short story. So here we are going to look at a poem by Daruwalla. And the poem is called Migrations. Think about it for a moment. What does the word migration mean to you? So many kinds of migration we talk about. But let's see what Daruwalla means by migration. The poem is Migrations. I want to insist on the S, the plural, because when I think of migration, to me, it's usually bird migration. And remember, when we use the word migration with reference to birds, they always go back. But in this poem, there is absolutely no chance of going back. Let me begin by reading the poem to you. Migrations are always difficult. Ask any drought, any plague. Ask the year 1947. Ask the chronicles themselves. If there had been no migrations, would there have been enough history to munch on? Look at the word. He uses the word munch. We have to keep thinking about what has happened before history can be written. And right in the first verse itself, he tells us which migration he's thinking about. 1947, most of us are post-independent Indians. But does that mean we do not know of the pain of 1947? As hundreds of thousands of people trudged miles and miles across borders, going in both directions. So he says drought and plague can be reason for migration. And you have to think about all those moments in history when people had to walk in search of food. But this is much worse because we are talking of 1947. Going back in time is also tough. Ask anyone backtracking to Sargodha or Jhelum or Miyawali, and they will tell you. New faces among old brick, politeness, sentiment dripping from the lips of strangers. This is still your house, sir. Look at how sad the idea is. You have walked across. The places that he mentions are well-known border towns. They have walked by, and then suddenly one day you get an opportunity to go back. Backtracking, he calls it. What a beautiful phrase. And then you go back, and a stranger now occupies your house. I don't think I have time to talk about all that happened when somebody took away your house because they lost something on the other side of the border. And now when you go to see your house, somebody else is standing there. And he says, yes, sir, it is still your house. Sheer politeness. But does that make the pain any less? Remember, he has been through all this. And if you meditate on time that is no longer time, the past is frozen. It is stone. That which doesn't move and pulsate is not time. If you meditate on that scrap of time, the mood turns pensive, like the monsoons gathering in the skies, but not breaking. The dark clouds of sorrow of these people who are forced to migrate. We love clouds because we think now it's going to rain and the darkness, the pall of gloom will disappear. But here, there is absolutely no chance. And let us look at the last words. Mother used to ask, don't you remember my mother? You'd be in the kitchen all time and run with the fry she laid it out, still sizzling on the plate. Don't you remember mother at all? And then he says, my dreams ask me now if I remember my mother, and I'm not sure how I'll handle that. Migrating across years is also difficult. It is not just space that we are talking about. When we talk about the concept of migration, we are also talking about time. Think, how many of you remember your grandmother? Maybe some of you. But if grandma died long ago, right, she has migrated into another world and you don't remember her. I think this is one of the saddest poems of Daruwalla because he's talking about a period, about an experience which can never be explained to somebody who has not himself experienced it. I always go back to figures of speech after I've read and tried to explain a poem. The simile and the metaphor and the personification and the rhetorical question, you know all of them, my dear friends. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the tone of this poem, a sense of bewilderment, a sense of the paradoxical experiences of life, the importance of memory. Remembering is so important. As somebody pointed out, it's not remembering, but it is remembering it again. When one is asked to leave home, the sense of bewilderment. And added to all this is the importance of history, lest we forget. When I read a poem like this, or when I choose a poem like this, I ask myself, why this? I choose a poem because I have experienced it. Or I choose a poem because I am lucky not to have experienced this. I think Migrations is one such poem. When I see the pain of somebody forced into migration, and though I was born after independence, the stories of 1947, the stories of the pain of people forced to leave homes. And then I read this poem and I could well empathize with the poet and hundreds of people like them. Do read such poems because we need to understand what others have gone through. And then maybe be thankful that you didn't have to go through one such experience.